policy in India and the post-independent India. Like what are the challenges to democracy, how exactly it has unfolded, and what are the events which has unfolded. Yeah, before that, we'll take up the question which you're asking. So, how to read the committees and commissions report? Like, I suggest like there are three stages when we are reading the committee and commission report. The first stage is who are the committee members, or sorry, what is the committee? What is it for? Like, for example, a particular committee is related to agricultural policy. A particular committee is related to maybe the uh, the the position of women in India, or one is related to education. Make a list of the committees and commissions and what is it related to. This is the first level. This can be asked in your prelims. The second level is you are actually going through the committee reports, the important recommendations of the committee. Maybe, for example, when we are reading about interstate relations, there are commissions like Sarkaria Commission or Punchi Commission or Second Administrative Reforms Commission. So, major important committees and commissions reports or recommendations, maybe 1 or 2 points. Okay, that should be enough. This would be helpful in writing a or in prelims if you get like which of the following are not recommended by this committee or recommended by this committee. This would be helpful in prelims, and in mains it would be helpful when you are actually writing your or mains. You can substantiate your answer. Like this committee has suggested this one. This committee has suggested this one. This would increase your weightage in the exam. And third level students, they actually internalize the commit. Like whenever you are reading any topic, for example, when you are preparing about agricultural policy of India, read about MS Swaminathan Commission, read about Shanta Kumar Panel Commission. Okay, so if you read about these ones, these committees would have done a in-depth analysis of agriculture policy in India. You'll get lot of you can say this one to read about. Now from where you will read these committees are generally very lengthy. Good that you pointed out like 300 pages, 400 pages. Now how much you have read the first page about the committee. When it is constituted, it would be given a mandate, that is called terms of reference. Okay, for what purpose we are constituting the committee, what is the objective of the committee is called terms of reference. Read about terms of reference. Okay, what is the purpose of this? Then read the last page where it summarizes the way forward. This is enough. Okay, the first page and the last page, which gives the first one the problems and last how they are trying to address those challenges. This should be more than enough for your exam. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions from anyone else, or let us begin? uh, yeah, I hope we do have yeah, participants, 12 participants, and you are able to see my recording as well, right? Okay, you are able to see me, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah, okay, thanks. So what we have covered in the previous classes is what how was India after the independence, what are the challenges it faced, and how India tackled those challenges. One is the integration of princely states, one is the state reorganization in India, the other is the issue of partition, and how India was able to tackle the challenges. Now, in addition to that, in India there were multiple other challenges. One more challenge is rise of democracy in India. That is, how would we ensure that the democracy would be there in India, and how would democracy prevail in India? You can write down a statement. You can write down a statement. India is the most successful form of democracy. India is the most successful form of democracy. Would you agree with this or no? The,
Partly.
partly yes. Okay. So now you can continue the statement. India is the most successful form of democracy in the third world. In the third world. In the third world. That means when India became independent, This was the time the world was facing the problem of the two superpowers. This phase, what we called as Cold War. Okay, during the process of Cold War, what happened was the world was completely polarized between one camp led by US, the other camp led by Soviet Union. That is what we call it as USSR. So those countries which joined the US bloc, they are called First World. Those countries which joined the second bloc, the Soviet bloc, they are called Second World. And the countries led by India and other countries, we call it as the third bloc, or these countries are called third world countries. Now, along with India, a lot of other countries became independent. We were discussing in our neighborhood only. India became independent, Bangladesh became independent, Pakistan became independent, Sri Lanka, Myanmar. Now, in and around India itself, a lot of countries became independent, but none of the countries could go on the path of democracy. Now, all countries wanted to have democracy, but ironically, all countries turned into dictatorships. All countries turned into dictatorships. Now, it is not only the case in India and its neighbors, but also across the world, like countries in Africa, countries in Southeast Asia, countries in Latin America, one after the other, they became dictatorships. Now, one challenge for India is, would India remain democratic? Now, what are the questions, what are the challenges, and how we have ensured this one? Okay, now before getting into this topic, we should have the historical context. That is, in India, there was never democracy historically. Okay, historically, if you see, we never had democracy. That means Indian society had always been a hierarchical society, hierarchy based society. Okay, Hierarchy. Hierarchy means one above the other, one below the other. This is what we call it as hierarchical society. That is either on caste lines or religious lines or gender basis or ethnic basis. Some groups claim to be we are at the top. Some groups are always downtrodden and they were exploited or discriminated. Now, a society which is always hierarchical, how would we ensure that there is democracy? Democracy calls for equality. That is one person, one vote. Can this happen in India? This is a question. That means in other countries, before they become democratic, what happened is first the society became democratic, then politically it became democratic. But in India, this society till today is not democratic. Always we see that one caste at the top, the other castes at the bottom. One religion at the top, other religions at the bottom. Though Constitution has said that Brahmins and Dalits are both are one and the same, and both would be having one vote each. But in practice, it never had been the case. Always the Dalits were exploited, and always some groups were exploited based on caste lines or gender lines or religious lines. Okay, now, though the democracy, political democracy started in India from 1950. Okay, the Republican form of government started in India. That society, would it transform to democratic society or not? This was a question because this is not new for India. This is centuries old, if not millennia old. Thousands of years, it is for thousands of years. The society was like this. Now, with one document, that is what we call it as constitution, can the society can become democratic? This is one concern for Indian founding fathers. Okay. Now, I hope like you got the challenge for democracy in India. First challenge is our society, or historically, when we see India, it was never ever democratic. Now, there were some examples of democracies which prevailed in India. Make a list of those democracies which prevailed in India in ancient and medieval times. Okay, for example, take the case of the Buddhist Sangha. Buddhist Sangha. They were democratic. That means once you're part of the Sangha, that is Brotherhood, Buddhist Brotherhood, you would be given equal rights. There were votings, every decision was taken by voting. So one is Buddhist Sangha, which was called calling about, you can say, equality. Then there were other principles. There were other examples during the Chola kingdom. where there were village level democracies. Okay, where there were village democracies during the Chola times. Okay, there were some examples here and there in India where there was some sort of democracies, but in short, Indian society never had this concept of democracy. So society as a whole, it was always hierarchical. Can we establish democracy in India? This was a question. Now, what challenges we have faced, that's what we are going to discuss. Now, before we actually go into the democracy, democratic systems, can anyone tell me what is the meaning of democracy according to you?
All the decisions
It's
are
just we call people's rule, sir.
Any other good definition? People's rule. Anything else?
Where everybody has equal rights, politically, I mean, economically, socially, and they are able to elect their own government, and each person has equal right of voting, and one vote is one person's vote. I mean, every person's vote is equal.
Yeah,
So this is what democracy is briefly.
very good. Yeah, that is either you are a upper caste or lower caste, either you are a Hindu or Muslim, either you are a man or a woman, you will be getting only one vote. That is politically we are one. Okay, that is democracy believes in the principles of equality. Now, this concept of democracy is a challenge to Indian society because Indian society, as I told, it was always hierarchical. Now, this was there for centuries, if not thousands of years. Okay, since the Vedic times, the stratification of Indian society happened. Now, can one document came in 1950? That is what we call it as constitution. Can this document change the entire society? The answer is no. But it is in the right direction. But when it will change? When it will change? That is where the question is. Now, to understand the issues of democracy in India, we have to also understand the issues of, you can say, the constitutional features. Now, in constitution, yeah, I hope like you know the Abraham Lincoln's definition of democracy, for the people, by the people. Okay. Now, there are different models of democracy. If you want, you can make a note of different models of democracy. Okay. The first model is called indirect democracy. Indirect. And the second model is called direct democracy. Can anyone tell me whether India is a direct or indirect democracy?
indirect.
Any idea what is indirect?
Indirect democracy, sir.
Very good. What do you understand by indirect democracy?
Sir, where the people is going to elect their representatives, sir. Where people is not going to directly rule this country. They are going to elect as MPs, MLAs. Through them, we are going to rule our country.
Right.
This we call indirect
Right.
democracy, which I
Very
know.
good. Very good. Very good. You are exactly correct. So indirect democracy, there are again two different things in indirect democracy. One, we call it as representative democracy. Okay, I'll just put it here. Maybe I'll take a empty slide so that I can actually draw something. Yeah, you can just make this tabular column. Democracy. Democracy is having two. One is indirect democracy. Indirect democracy. One is direct democracy. Now, are there any examples of direct democracy in the world today?
I think Switzerland.
Switzerland, very good. Yeah, not complete Switzerland. Some cantons of Switzerland practice direct democracy. Cantons means in India we have states. Okay, in Switzerland they call it as cantons. The provinces are called cantons. Some cantons of Switzerland they have direct democracy which is being practiced. Now, almost all the democracies in the world are indirect democracy. Even in indirect, there are two models. One is representative democracy. One is participatory democracy. Participatory democracy. You can just write down one question. You can just write down one question. Now, first of all, what is representative democracy means? We elect our representatives, and on the behalf of the people, the representatives would be taking their decisions. Okay, now India is a representative democracy. Now almost all the countries in the world are representative democracies. Now you can take a question. India is India is elections only democracy. India is elections only democracy. Okay, you can put elections only in quotations. Comment. India is elections only democracy. Comment. Now, what do you understand by elections only democracy?
So, elections only democracy, that means we have equality only during the vote. I mean, only during casting
Yeah,
the vote.
that means whatever we are talking about democracy, it is there only because of elections. Do you agree with this statement or do you not agree with this statement? I hope like you got the question. India, would you call India as elections on it? Do you call India an elections on democracy? Would you agree or would you not agree? Anyone? Any reasons why you agree, why you not agree?
Sir, I do agree on
Mm-hmm.
this because democracy, I mean, we do have a democracy politically because everybody is able to cast their vote, I mean, irrespective of their caste, creed, religion, or whatever. But not everybody is getting equal representation. And that again depends on a lot of other factors like the financial strength and one belonging to certain rich or influential families. And this is where we can see a lot of inequality. And also when we consider the economy as one of the factors, we can see a lot of gap between the rich and the poor. So India can be called the election only
Okay.
democracy
Okay.
in one way.
So when you are answering, like try to make your answer balanced. So when you are pointing out when you are agreeing with this statement, you should also disagree with this statement. So write down the points where you agree. Okay, give the examples, maybe 5 examples where you agree that India is only elections, only democracy. Yeah, as you rightly pointed out, the people are already divided on caste lines, on religious lines, on language lines, on ethnic lines. Okay, there are different divisions in India. And once we elect for 5 years, once we elect our representatives for 5 years, we do not know what is going on also. Okay, that is, once we elect for 5 years, like every 5 years, there is some democracy. We go for elections, and elections in India would be done with a lot of like a festival. Like I hope you know that. Now, once elections are done, again we are again being ruled by our rulers completely. That is, our role would be very limited. But what are the reasons by which we can say India is not elections only democracy? That is what we call it as participatory democracy. That means citizens do not only participate in elections but also in other aspects of governance. If citizens' participation is there, then we call participatory democracy. Now, where do you put India? India is here or India is here? Where do you think India is here? India started its journey here. In 1950s, it was here, and 2020s, it is here. If I wanted to graphically represent India's journey, India today, it is somewhere between representative and participatory. We are moving towards participatory, but we are not completely
Sir,
participatory.
Gram Sabha is, I think, Gram Sabha is, I think, good example for the
Yeah,
participatory democracy.
very good example, perfect example. So in here, when you are not agreeing with this, you can write the examples how we can say that India is a participatory democracy. One you give very good example, that is, you can write down 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts. 73rd and again, do not write story here. Okay, 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts 1992. Local government, local self-government. Anything else by which we can say citizens participating in governance process? Any other example? Can anyone think of apart from elections?
We have right to
Very good,
information. We have
perfect,
TILs.
perfect. RTI. You can write RTA 2005. Then PIL. What is PIL? Public
Public
interest
interest
litigation. Very good.
litigations.
Anything else?
sir,
And there
can
is
we consider NGOs?
Very good,
NGOs.
perfect. NGOs, because the other organs are also. Can someone mute your microphone? I'm getting echo. Okay, so in addition to government, a lot of other players are also playing an important role in governance. Okay, now one challenge in India is today, whatever problem is there in India, we say that the government is not doing properly. Have noticed this? That is, if there is no good roads, what people would say, government is not doing properly. If there is no literacy rate, we say government is not functioning properly. If there is no education or no, if there are poverty levels, we say government is not doing properly. Now, this is what we call it as state-centric theory. That is, for everything wrong in the country, we are only blaming the government. I hope you got it. Now, in addition to this, if I ask any one of you, like, why do you want to become civil servant? What is your question? What is your answer to that? Okay, I hope most of you would say that you wanted to serve the country. Okay, that is serving the country. You'll say that I wanted to serve my country. But if you want to serve the country, you need not be only in the government. I hope you agree with that. Okay, see, government definitely plays a role, but it is not the only player in the governance process. That is why you have a topic called governance. Okay, that is, in addition to government, there are a lot of other players who play an important role in governance. Okay, government is one organ for governance, not the only organ. Is it clear? That is, in addition to government, there are other players. Like there are NGOs, there are self-help groups, there are microfinance institutions, there are charities, there are corporates who are helping the people. Like for example, heard of the Tatas, the welfare initiatives, the Wipro, okay, Ajim Premji, the charity, the Melinda Gates Foundation, now CSR activities. Now even the corporates are working for the upliftment of the people. They are providing jobs, they are providing employment. Okay. Now when we are writing your answers, so do not only focus only on the government and governmental policies. Try to mention about the others. Okay, we do have NGOs, we do have self-help groups. Okay, and in addition to this, even the citizens are also play a very important role in governance. Maybe for example, if there is a doctor, if he is treating the poor patients, maybe we can say that he is also helping in the governance process. Maybe if there is a teacher in a tribal locality, maybe he might be doing a lot of service to the country. Then maybe probably then lot of other government servants, okay, maybe a private teacher helping the tribals to get educated. Maybe a shopkeeper is there, if he is paying the taxes on time properly, he is also helping the government. Okay, I hope you got it. Now, it is not only the government which plays a role in governance. This is what we should be very cautious about. That is, not only the government, when we say IAS, IPS, they do play a very important role. In addition to them, a lot of other scope is there to play a role in the governance. Okay, that is what we call it as the other players in governance process. You can mention about them like NGOs, self-help groups, CSR activities. All these are playing a part in the governance. Anything else by which we can say India is moving towards participatory democracy? Any other? Can anyone tell me apart from this one? See, I gave some points by which we can say India is elections only democracy. Now, in addition to that, how can we say that we are moving towards participatory democracy? Any other? Okay, so I'll give you the points you can write down. Rights issues. Rights issues. Rights issues means maybe in 1950s, 1960s, if government is constructing a school, people are thinking that people are in a notion that government is doing some charity. Okay, if government is starting a program for a scheme, welfare scheme for people, the people are very you can say very humble to the government. Okay, they are requesting the government, please provide us a school in our village, or please provide us a road in the village. And if the government does, maybe the MP or MLA would get you can say a function would be there. They will praise the ministers or the IAS officers. Okay, now this is where we call it as charity based approach. charity-based approach. That means if the government is doing something, people are treating that as charity. But from charity-based approach, we are now moving towards rights-based approach. That is, earlier they are requesting from the government, now they are demanding from the government. Have you noticed this? Maybe the people in 1960s and the citizens in 2020. The difference. Earlier, they are at the mercy of the state. Now, they are demanding their rights from the government. For example, we have right to food. What is right to food? Which act? Can anyone tell me? Right to food.
National
Yeah, very
Food
good. NFSA
Security Act.
2013. Then right to work. What is right to work? Manrega.
NREGA.
Okay, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Right to work, right to information, okay, right to education. Now we are demanding from rights, some through constitutional rights, some through fundamental rights, some through legal rights. Okay, earlier it was charity-based approach. Now that's why one topic is there in your GS2 paper, rights issues. Okay, that is earlier from charity-based approach to rights-based approach. Now the media is also active. Okay, you would have seen the media is also active because in 1950s, 1960s, the role of media is very much limited because whatever the information the citizens would get, mostly from the government's viewpoint. There are other media houses, but you can see that the regulation of government was much more. Maybe if you want to publish an article in newspaper, you have to take a permission from the government. But today, thanks to the technological advancements, social media, now you can criticize the government in various forums. But in 1950s, 1960s, the media itself was very limited, and that too, the government administered media used to play a role. Like radio, you have only All India Radio. When the TV came, it is only the Doordarshan. So they will give only the government's viewpoint. Now today we have multiple TV channels, multiple news channels. Okay, maybe in different languages, any language you take, multiple news channels, multiple TV channels. So media is also playing a role. Okay, then social media, people are also hyperactive. Okay, I'm not saying only active, they are hyperactive. For example, when you're traveling by train, if the charger is not working, they are directly tweeting to the railway minister. I noticed this. So how the people are making the government accountable. They are forcing the government to work. That is, we are moving towards participatory democracy, but this process is not complete. Okay, why it is not complete? Because we are doing this maybe not on everyday basis, maybe sometimes. Again, not everyone is doing this also. Okay, only there are few sections, few people who are able to afford to do this. Not everyone. That is why we are saying that we are moving towards from representative to participatory. From participatory, the target would be to move towards direct democracy. Okay, it is a logical end for democracy. Now, I hope you got the, you can say, roadmap, like in which we started, in which we have begun. Now, during this time, there was, at one point of time, there was some blackout to democracy. That is 1975 to 77. Okay, one major challenge for India's democracy came in 1975 to 1977. This is where we will focus on today. Okay, I hope the agenda for today's session is clear. Democracy, the threat to democracy, challenge, and how we try to go through the challenge. Any questions till now? You can have a look at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's argument in Constitution Assembly, because during the Constituent Assembly there was one provision in the constitutions, that is what we call it as emergency provisions. One of the major challenges for the constitution makers is about emergency provisions. Now these emergency provisions, can anyone tell me from which country we have borrowed these emergency provisions in Indian constitution? Germany?
From German?
Yeah, not exactly Germany, it is called Weimar Constitution. Okay, that is Hitler's constitution. That is Germany before its reunification, it was called Weimar, W-E-I-M-E-R. So Germany before, just like Russia before 1991, it's called Soviet Union. Germany, before its reunification, it's called Weimar Republic. We borrowed the emergency provisions from Hitler's constitution, that is Weimar Constitution. Now there was lot of arguments and counter arguments to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. They argued that the critics argued that why there is an emergency provision, this is a threat on democracy, because during the time of emergency, India would be ruled from one single point of contact. That means there is a heavy centralization of powers. Should it be there? Because it could be misused. Now, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar said is this emergency provisions would be like a dead letter in the constitution. I hope no one would be able to, no one would be using it. But at the other hand, whenever there is a emergency situation, instead of many constitutions are breaking. See, constitutions work well when in the normal times. Constitutions would break whenever there are challenges. Now, what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has said is, in the case of crisis-like situations, this is an actual test for constitutions. Now, during this time, our constitution has to survive. That is why we have kept emergency provisions. Now, in fact, there are 3 emergency provisions which are there. I hope you know that. One is Article 352. If you want, you can write down. If you have already studied in your polity, it is fine. Otherwise, we will focus mostly on the political events, post-independent history. Okay. One is Article 252, 352. That is what we call it as national emergency. This is called national emergency. Then Article 356. This is called state emergency. This is called state emergency. In brackets, write president's rule. In brackets, write president's rule. This is often called president's rule, but the official term is state emergency. Article 356. Then we have Article 360, that is called financial emergency. So emergency provisions, they can broadly divide into 3 categories: national emergency, state emergency, and financial emergency. Okay, so these are the 3 different types of emergencies which were there in the constitution. Now our purpose is to read what are the events which led to the imposition of emergency, and most importantly the national emergency, which happened in 1975 to 77. Now, can anyone tell me how many times the national emergency was imposed in India? 3 times. Very good. Perfect. 3 times it has been imposed. Out of the 3 times, the first, the one emergency becomes very much, you can say, controversial. Now we will discuss upon that particular emergency when it was imposed. Okay, if you want, you can make a note. Article 352. Article 352 has been imposed 3 times. Article 352 or national emergency was imposed 3 times in India. It can be that is, the reason can be war, external aggression, external aggression, armed rebellion. Okay, put armed rebellion in quotations. War, external aggression, armed rebellion. Okay, now you can take the dates. There are 3 times the emergency has been imposed: October 1962 to January 1968, December 1971 to March 1977, then June 1975 to March 1977. Okay, now if you closely look at these dates, okay, there is nothing wrong with the dates. If you closely look at the dates, there is something you will identify. What is that?
Overlapping of time.
Now, there has been overlap from 1971 to 1977. Now, one thing which might be bothering you, if there is already an emergency which is ongoing, why another emergency has been imposed? Now, what are the grounds the emergency has been imposed and what would be the implication of this? Okay, and first two emergencies are not controversial. The third emergency is controversial. Okay, that is what this we say that it's like a threat on our internal Indian democracy. 1977, 1975 to 1977. Now, first of all, why the emergency has been imposed during this time? Now, I told you the reasons: war, external aggression, and armed rebellion. Now, why do you think emergency was imposed 1962 to 1968? What was going on in India? 19,
India-China war.
yeah, very good.
China war.
1962 we had a war with China, and 1965 we had a war with Pakistan. So because there was continuous wars, and during this time there was emergency imposed. Once the war was over, normalcy was restored, and this emergency was lifted. So there is no controversy in this first emergency. The second thing, what happened in 1971? Can anyone tell me? Again, war with Pakistan. Okay, war with Pakistan, because this was a time when the Bangladesh was created. I hope you know that in 1971 Bangladesh became a independent country. The East Pakistan became independent. Now this was also the time when we had the war with Pakistan. Now this,
But that war lasted only for
right,
7 days.
right.
I think,
That is the
7
question
days
here.
or 9.
Now the war was only for few days, and just in 1972 Indian government has signed a agreement that is called Shimla Agreement in 1972. And between India and Pakistan, normalcy was restored, and everyone was expecting that India would become a normal country. That is, emergency would be lifted. But during this time, this emergency was not lifted. In fact, one more emergency was imposed in 1975. This is where the controversial aspects start. Okay, first of all, what happens during national emergency? What exactly what exactly are the events which led to the emergency, imposition of emergency? This is something which we need to know. Now, can anyone tell me what happens during emergency? Now, Article 352 is imposed. What happens?
State government
Okay.
remains suspended. India will be a
India,
military country.
okay, state government would not be suspended. State government, it does not have any impact on the state legislatures. Only thing, the term of Lok Sabha and Legislative Assembly can be extended, not more than 1 year at a time. Okay, it does not affect, you can say, the state governments. But however, the legislative powers of parliament is assumed over the state list. Okay, that is, state government would be there, but state government does not have any power. The constitution basically becomes unitary in its structure. Okay, it is not, state government would not be suspended. So it should be very clear, when national emergency is imposed, state government is not suspended. Anything else?
So fundamental rights of Indian citizens
Okay, can you be more
suspended.
specific? Which can be suspended?
6 rights,
Yeah.
6 freedoms
Very good.
under right to freedom.
So that is 19 would be suspended. This would be mentioned in Article 358. Are you noticing here? Article 358, it says that suspensions of the 6 sets of freedoms under, whenever national emergency is imposed, Article 358 would come into picture. Then Article 359 can also come into picture. Now, what is Article 359? Suspension of enforcement of fundamental rights. Now, you should be very cautious in your polity prelims. This can be different. These are two different. Ask your polity faculty what is the difference between these two. Okay, Article 358 and Article 359. Now, this is just suspension of fundamental rights. This is suspension of enforcement of fundamental rights. Now, which articles can never be suspended? Can anyone tell me? In India, there are 2 articles, 2 fundamental rights.
Article
20 and 21.
21.
Article
Right to
20
life.
and Article 21. Article 20 is about conviction, offense to conviction. Then Article 21, that is right to life. Now, yeah, right to life and personal liberty. Now, what happened was, this was not there in the original constitution. Now, original constitution, any fundamental right can be suspended, including Article 21 and Article 20. Now, what happened was, now I hope you got the reason why the two emergencies were imposed. The first emergency was imposed when 1971 first emergency was imposed. Only Article 19 was taken away. Article 19 means right to freedom of speech and expression, right to move freely in India, okay, right to form assemblies. All these democratic rights were suspended. But in the next emergency in 1975, the other fundamental rights, including the arrest and detention, conviction, and right to life and personal liberty, all these were also be suspended. That is why two emergencies were imposed. Okay. Now, first of all, what are the reasons? What are the background things which were going on in the country? Okay, I hope it's clear till here. Any questions? Any questions? What is this? What is any questions about emergency provisions? Because this is very important discussion, not only in your post-independence history but also in your polity. Yeah. So, any questions? Do stop me. Okay, otherwise I'll take it as you know. Now, to understand the events which are unfolding in the country, we have to see what is going on in the country then. Now, I hope you all know that during the Congress was the only political party which is there in India. Now, in Congress, we had Nehru, and it was in 1964 the Nehru died. Okay, when Nehru died, the question is what would happen to not the question is not who would lead next. The question was what would happen to India, because as I told, India was having lot of challenges. India, just like after the death of Jinnah, Pakistan turned into dictatorship. Now the question is whether India, after the death of Nehru, will it become dictatorship because of rising challenges which India had. In 1963, 1962 we had a war with China. 1963 the Nagaland independence movement was going on, and finally Nagaland was given a statehood. Okay, if you could recollect state reorganization. AZ Faizo, there was a pact with Nehru. Okay, now this was also the time a lot of other challenges were also brewing in India. Now, after the death of Nehru, the question was what would happen to India? The question is not who would be next. The question is what would happen to India? Would India survive? Would the void of Nehru would be taken over? Now, within Congress, there were various voices. Now, the challenge for Congress was not from outside. The challenge for Congress was from within, inside only. From 1947 to 1964, it was under the Nehru's rule. Now, after Nehru, a less controversial leader, a least controversial leader, Lal Bahadur Shastri, came into power. Okay, so out of nowhere, in fact, there are towering leaders in Congress like Morarji Desai, and all these were set aside. And out of nowhere, Lal Bahadur Shastri surprisingly became the prime minister. That is, he was the least controversial of all. Okay, the other were more controversial. And I hope you know that this was during the time of Lal Bahadur Shastri when the Indo-Pakistan War, second Indo-Pakistan War started, 1965 war. Okay, and it was during this time the the slogan, the Jai Jawan Jai Kisan, was given by Lal Bahadur Shastri, and he was a very simple man. And after his mysterious death of Lal Bahadur Shastri in 1966, I hope you know that there was a Tashkent conference. After India-Pakistan war, there was an agreement at Tashkent, brokered by Soviet Union. Now, during this time, Shastri went to Soviet Union, then Soviet Union. Can anyone tell me which country Tashkent is in? Uzbekistan, yes. Okay, now it is a completely different country. So this was a time when India, Pakistan, so on Indian side, Lal Bahadur Shastri, and Pakistan side, Ayub Khan. So they started making attempting a pact. Now this was a time when mysterious death of Lal Bahadur Shastri happens. Now the next question is, again the question comes up, what would happen to India? That is, whether India would be surviving or not. Now those leaders who were there in Congress, okay, they were always conflicts within the Congress. Now during this particular time, what happened was, again they wanted to choose a leader. Now within the Congress, what happened was, there were some people in the Congress They were like kingmakers. I hope you know who are kingmakers. That means they would be nowhere, but they would be taking the decisions. Okay, for example, in Congress today, Sonia Gandhi. Okay, if you see Sonia Gandhi, she was not officially the prime minister, but almost all decisions were taken by her. Okay, this the high command culture. Now, during this time, even in Congress, there emerged a group of kingmakers. Those kingmakers, we call them as syndicate. SYNDICATE. Okay, syndicate means the group, a inner group within Congress, which used to take all the decisions. Now, this syndicate felt that if any other leader comes, okay, so among us there would be clash. Now let us make a ruler who would be listening to our voices. That means just for the namesake, there would be Manmohan Singh, and behind the lines, it is Sonia Gandhi who would run the government. I hope you got the understanding. In the same way, they felt like Indira Gandhi would be the Gungi Gudia. That is, she will be taking over, and I'm just keeping you some these ones cartoons so that you will be able to recollect what exactly happened. So they felt like Indira Gandhi would be the name, and behind the lines, we can actually rule the country. Now this was the syndicate. You can see the people of syndicate. We'll see them. Now Morarji Desai, after Nehru, he was in the line, but after Lal Bahadur Shastri, again he was in the line. You can see Morarji Desai being defeated by Congress, other syndicate members, and made Indira Gandhi as the prime minister. Okay, I hope it's clear till here. Any questions? Okay, now what happened was in 1967 there was an election. These elections are assembly elections. Now, for the first time, what happened in the country was Congress started losing. Now, from 1950s till 1967, it was only the Congress at center and Congress at state level. Now, at center it is Congress, at state it is Congress. But 1967, what happened was at center there was no other political party which can challenge Congress. But state level there are lot of opposition political parties which came up. Now, this opposition was there, okay, in Kerala or West Bengal, here and there for some portions of time before 1967. But for the first time in 1967 elections, Congress lost in various state level government. Now, for the first time, the questions of federalism has cropped up. You know, federalism, that means the center state relations. What would happen to the center state relations? Because in India, from 1967 to 50 to 67, Congress was at center, Congress was at state. So always the terms between center and states were very good. But when opposition political parties came up, the question of federalism has started. The question of federalism has started. The center state challenges or center state disputes started cropping up from 1967. But at center, there was no other political party which can challenge Congress. But in 1977, Congress for the first time was defeated at the center also by the Janata Party. Okay, that means I hope you got the understanding. From 1950s to 1967, it was only Congress both at state and central. Okay, barring few examples. But from 1967, at center it was only Congress, but at states there emerged new political parties, regional parties. And from 1977 onwards, Congress was threatened with other opposition at center also. Now, this particular phase, what the scholars call as Congress system. Okay, that is, it was only Congress and Congress, at least at the center level. Okay. Now, they used to say that from Delhi to Calcutta, you can travel by all non-Congress states. Now, if you see from Delhi to Kolkata, Delhi to UP to Bihar to Calcutta, you can only see the non-Congress states. It's not only from here, but here also it is not Congress states. And southern states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, the Congress did not make much inroads. Here there were communist parties in Kerala. Okay, whereas in Tamil Nadu there are Dravidian parties. Okay, here it is a class issue. Here it is a language issue. Okay, whereas in here the Congress also started losing in its strongholds. Okay, from 1967. Now, Indira Gandhi, who came to power, had multiple challenges, not only internally but also externally. Okay, any questions till now, or are you able to follow? Do stop me if you have any other questions. Now, it is in 1967 the challenges of federalism to be coming up because of various other, you can say, uh, 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 political developments which are happening in the country. Now, Indira Gandhi started a new program that is called the 10-point program. Now, under this 10-point program, she started having a social control of banking institutions, then nationalization of insurance sector, nationalization of different other sectors. Okay, nationalization means government would take the control of all these banks, because if you see banks before 1970s, the private banks, they are not working for welfare of people, they were working only for profits. Now all the banks were taken over and there was nationalization of banks, and again this private players started entering after 1991 liberalization. Now from 1970s we became more and more socialist, we became more and more tilted towards socialism. We started making the populist demands. The critics call it as populist demands or populist measures. Populism means where you get mass votes. Okay, populist, because of common people, they would be very happy when the banks get nationalized. Okay, they might not understand the intricacies of this. Okay, populist measures and pro poor measures, whereas the supporters called it as pro poor measures. And zamindari system was abolished. The property right to property was taken away. Okay, the right to property was earlier it was a fundamental right. Later, by 24th Amendment Act, this right to property was taken away from the fundamental rights. And this was also the time the princely states, the privy purses were ended. Indira Gandhi called this as blood money. That is, on one hand, people are not having food, but you are giving money every year. Government of India is giving money to the princes for their luxuries. Now this one is blood money. I'm going to abolish it. Now because of all these measures, her popularity started increasing, and she started having her own agenda of development, and she was not taking the support of the syndicate. Okay, the syndicate which felt that Indira Gandhi would be like a puppet, and on her behalf they would be ruling. But over time she started developing, you can say she started developing her own set of agenda, and her you can say the popularity started increasing, and the syndicate was slowly losing the control over Indira Gandhi. I hope you got the challenges, or this one, the developments which are happening in the country. And this was also the time, as I told, like the banks were nationalized, and you can see the syndicate. Okay, the syndicate, Morarji Desai gets exited from the syndicate, and almost all the, you can say, the top level sectors like insurance sectors or bank sectors were nationalized also. The right to property was abolished, zamindari was abolished, privy purses was abolished, land reforms were started with lot of vigor. And this was a time when the syndicate, as I told, was in disarray. These were the members of the syndicate. Now you can see some of the top leaders like K. Kamaraj or Neelam Sanjeev Reddy and S.K. Patil, okay, S. Nijalingappa. Okay, all these are very popular leaders in their state level, or Atulya Ghosh. Okay, now later they will become presidents or chief ministers of their respective states. Now the syndicate started thinking like, if Indira Gandhi captures all the powers, then our influence in Congress would reduce. Now this was also the time when the presidential elections have happened in 1969. Okay, so I hope you got the background of this one. Like in 1966, after the death of Lal Bahadur Shastri, Indira Gandhi came to power. When Indira Gandhi came to power, there are a lot of challenges in Congress, within and outside. And this was the time when 1969 the presidential elections were announced. Now during these presidential elections, now the Congress party has proposed the name of Neelam Sanjeev Reddy. Okay, Neelam Sanjeev Reddy. And Whereas Indira Gandhi, she said like, I would not support the Neelam Sanjeev Reddy as president. I would propose my own candidate, that is V.V. Giri. So on one side, Indira Gandhi proposed her candidate V.V. Giri, whereas Congress proposed this was proposed by Indira Gandhi. Okay, Indira Gandhi proposed her own Congress, her own candidate, whereas Congress party proposed Neelam Sanjeev Reddy as a presidential candidate. Now, what happened was during this presidential election. Now, who would vote for presidential election? Can anyone tell me?
MLAs.
All the elected
Okay.
MPs, all
Yes,
the
yeah,
elected
elected MPs and
MLAs
elected
of
MLAs
assembly.
participate in the electoral college of the election of president. Now, if you see this one, this is like a very a movie, a suspense movie. If you see here, like whenever there are elections, presidential elections, here maybe Rajendra Prasad 83% of votes he would receive, whereas the other opposition member got only 15.3%. Now, if you see these percentages, only at this particular point, you would notice that the elections were very close. 50.22, that is a very slim majority. V.V. Giri, that is Indira Gandhi's candidate, would win the elections. Now the party, Indian National Congress, led by the syndicate, would be completely disappointed with Indira Gandhi's performance. That means she is nowhere obeying to the party, and that is the reason she would be expelled out of Congress. Okay, Indira Gandhi would be expelled out of Congress, and they say that Indira Gandhi did not go with the party's order. I hope you got the reason why she was expelled. Because one reason is her popularity is increasing. Okay, what the syndicate expected and what Indira Gandhi doing are different. And also, this was the time the presidential election. You can see there was a bitter battle between the Indira Gandhi's candidate and Neelam Sanjeev Reddy candidate. And Indira Gandhi had support of some MPs and the Congress had support of some MPs. So this is where you can say the MPs were also divided. Some said we are going to join Indira Gandhi's camp. Some said we will join the syndicate, the old organizational syndicate. Now, this was also the time when she was having a bitter conflict with judiciary. Indira Gandhi was also having a very bitter conflict with judiciary. We will discuss it. There was Golaknath case. So if anyone know what happened in Golaknath case, again this is a screenshot from Lakshmikant. Okay, go through Lakshmikant. Okay, and check what happened in Golaknath case. Can anyone tell me what happened in Golaknath case 1967? Okay, so this was the time the Supreme. Yeah.
Is it Indira Gandhi was
No.
convicted in
That
malpractice
is something
of
different.
election
That
and
happened in Allahabad High Court judgment, 1975. That what happened later. Now, this Golaknath case said that Parliament cannot amend any part of the Constitution. Okay, so earlier the Parliament has the power to amend any part of the Constitution, but Golaknath case established judicial supremacy. That is, it said that Constitution is supreme. You cannot change Constitution as you want. Okay, now this was the time. This was the time, you can say, one political cartoon here where Indira Gandhi candidate V.V. Giri would win over the Neelam Sanjeev Reddy in the presidential election. Now, she would be once apart from winning the presidential election by her candidate, you can see that there are other things which would happen, like the princely states or the privy purses would be abolished. Okay, the abolition of purses, privileges. Now, this is like, you can say, a complete overthrowing of or having her own mandate of elections. Now, during this time, there was an elections which would be conducted and earlier than expected, that is in 1971. Now, during 1971 elections, on one side it was Indira Gandhi, and on the other side it was Congress. On one side it was Congress. Now, just to differentiate, Indira Gandhi called the MPs who came with her as Congress. Now, Indira Gandhi said this is the actual Congress, whereas those leaders who said here. Now, Congress had two INC or Congress, what we call it as Congress or Congress I. Okay, R is requisitionist and I is Indira Gandhi. Or this is one Congress, and there is one more Congress that is called Congress Organization or Congress Original. They called it as Congress War. Okay, that is which was led by syndicate. Now they said that this is the original Congress, whereas Indira Gandhi claimed that this is the original Congress. Okay, any questions? Now, this was a time when 1971 elections have taken place. Now, during, yeah, please. Any questions? Stop me. Okay, now this was a time when 1971 elections have taken place, and in 1971 elections, it was on one side Indira Gandhi, and on other side all other leaders, all other top leaders of Congress and other political parties. They came together. They believed that there is only one way we will form a coalition, and this grand coalition is going to defeat Indira Gandhi. This is what their expectation. But ironically, in 1971, the public sympathy was with Indira Gandhi. As I told, she was going with pro-poor, populist measures like nationalization of banks, abolition of private purses, 10-point program. Then on the other hand, she was also having the sympathy. Okay, one woman fighting so many strong men, and the daughter of Nehru. Again, you can see that in India we have a lot of emotional connect, and because of all these reasons, it was Indira Gandhi who came out with huge majority. And you can see here one cartoon which shows what happened after this one. It was literally she clean swept all the polls. In fact, the opposition or all the coalition would be nowhere. Okay, I'm just showing you a cartoon so that you will be able to recollect what exactly happened. You can see that almost all other positions, it was only the Congress. And Congress has won a lot of seats in 1971 general elections. And once she became the prime minister, she had no other, you can say, thoughts about what would happen to the opposition. Now, what she has done, she has completely centralized her powers. Now, all ministryships she gave to herself. That is, either all important ministries like home, finance, external affairs, railways, all ministries were given to herself. That is, there would be no opposition within Congress. As I told that Congress was the most democratic party. Okay, since the time of Gandhi and Nehru, we can see that Congress leadership was from grassroots, they would come to the top. But over time, this democratic principles in Congress were overridden and complete centralization of powers have taken place. Okay, you can see the cartoon where Indira Gandhi herself was carrying all important portfolios. And when assembly elections went, and some of the assembly elections went in her favor, and all assembly elections she kept, you can say, only her people as their choices. Okay, I hope you got the point. Like she was going through she kept those people who are like puppets, and only these puppet rulers would be the chief ministers of all the states. Now, when a huge centralization of powers was taking place during this time, what would happen is there was the challenges of Bangladesh would start. The challenges of Bangladesh would start. That is, within Bangladesh, in neighborhood, the West Pakistan started the military crackdown. And it was during this time they approached for India's help, and India has supported them. And in 1971, there was a war with Pakistan, and finally in this war, Bangladesh would emerge as a democratic and secular country. And Pakistan claims that India has done a very wrong thing in the liberation of Pakistan, and Pakistan wanted to take revenge upon this issue. I hope it's clear, very clear till here, what exactly happened. That is, 1966, she came to power, and 1969, there were presidential election. In presidential election, Indira Gandhi and Congress, the debate started, and she claimed that my party is the original Congress, whereas the syndicate claimed our party is the original Congress. And in 1971 elections, there was a, a tremendous victory of the party led by Indira Gandhi. And after this 1971 elections, her popularity further increased thanks to the Bangladesh, the liberation of Bangladesh. That is, by 1971, India ended the double threat. Okay, now what is this double threat? One side we have Pakistan, one side we have Pakistan. Okay, till 1971. The other side also we had Pakistan. But once Bangladesh became independent and the two secular democratic country, our two-sided threat came to an end. Now, because of this reason, her popularity, which was already huge, okay, her popularity, which was already huge, now this has further improved. Okay, I hope you got the gist of the events which happened during the time of Indira Gandhi regime. Any questions till now? Okay, now during this particular time, there was a bitter conflict Indira Gandhi had with judiciary. Now that conflict has culminated in a judgment in 1973. This is called Keshwanand Bharti case. Okay, I hope you know that there was a very important case that is called Keshwanand Bharti case in 1973. Can anyone quickly tell me what is Keshwanand Bharti case? What is the outcome of Keshwanand Bharti case? 1973. Can anyone tell me? Heard of Keshwanand Bharti case? Or hearing for the first time?
It is something related to temple lands or something, but later it made
Yeah.
sweeping changes to
What
all parts of
exactly do you
constitution.
understand by
Can
Keshwanand Bharti case? Very important. The most important case. If I have to pick up one Supreme Court judgment, okay, then I'll definitely pick up Keshwanand Bharti case because this is the most important judgment. Maybe in your polity class you'll learn more about this, but in short, anyone wanted to attempt what is Keshwanand Bharti case about? It was about Keshwanand Bharti case. Sorry, it was about basic structure doctrine. You can write down the doctrine of basic structure. The doctrine of basic structure. Doctrine of basic structure. Now, why it is important? Why it is so important? Doctrine of basic structure, Keshwanand Bharti case. Can anyone want to attempt, or do you know anything about that? Okay. Now, Keshwanand Bharti case called for constitutional supremacy. That means constitution cannot be amended by the parliament as we want, because when the constitution was drafted, just think of constitution like a building. Okay, this building would be having some basic structure. Now you cannot demolish the entire building and create a new building and call it as the old building. Okay, for example, let us think like you have a ancestral property. Okay, it is coming from maybe generations together. You cannot completely demolish that building, construct a new building, still call it as old building, right? So in the same way, Keshwanand Bharti case said that Indian constitution is like a heritage building. Now, what is our heritage from colonial past? The freedom struggle, national movement, all these were embodied, are mentioned in our constitution. The principles of equality, fraternity, justice, okay, what type of government we wanted. Now, imagine a particular political party would come and says that India would be a Hindu Rashtra. Can it happen? It cannot happen because the 1973 Keshwanand Bharti case said that secularism is a basic structure of Indian constitution. We cannot alter secularism in country. Now imagine a political party would come like Indira Gandhi's party and she wanted to make India into a dictatorship just by amending the constitution. In many countries the same thing happened. Like how Hitler came to power by democratic means. But Hitler changed Weimar constitution into a dictatorship constitution. Now, most of the countries, the dictators came through democratic process. That is the irony in the world. Okay, even dictators came through democratic process, but by becoming the most important persons, they crushed the very democratic institutions through which they have come from. Okay, it is they are now it is said like Hitler is the son of democracy, but he is also the destroyer of democracy. The son of democracy means, if you know the life story of Hitler, he was a small soldier in the German army. Okay, but in those times, a small soldier becoming the president itself was very miracle. Now, how he could become a president? By with the help of democratic institutions like principles of liberty, equality. Okay, by which a soldier of a low rank could become the president. But after becoming the president, he crushed the very democratic institutions which helped him to come out. So I hope you understood it. Now, a lot of countries turned into dictatorship using the same democratic institutions. Now, there was a concern that would India also become undemocratic country? Okay, the way the events which are happening in the country. Now, this was the time the Keshwanand Bharati case was given, saying that there are some features in Indian Constitution which you cannot alter. Those features, what we call it as basic structures. Just like a building has some foundations. Now you can make some cosmetic changes to the building. Okay, you can change some cosmetic changes to the building, but you cannot demolish the complete building and construct a new building. That is what we call it as basic structure doctrine. I hope you got a gist, but what exactly are the nitty-gritties? Maybe you'll study in your polity class. Okay, or if you want, maybe you can come prepared tomorrow or next week, so we can discuss further on Keshwanand Bharti case and 42nd Amendment Act. But if you have any questions, but you have to become prepared. Okay, then we can discuss further. Okay, so till here, any questions? What happened? Now, after 1973, there was a bitter conflict with judiciary, and Indira Gandhi was not ending the emergency which was imposed in 1971. Okay, that is the press rights were completely taken away. Then the right to work, right to this one was not uh, going on. Right to peaceful assemblies, right to you can say oppose the government, which is one of the basic features of democracy. They were not going on during this time. Now, this was a time when one more a famous leader called Raj Narayan. Okay, you can take a note of the name Raj Narayan. Okay, he was also another kingmaker. Now, Raj Narayan challenged the way Indira Gandhi became the prime minister. So, what Raj Narayan claimed is in 1971 elections, she did not participate in the elections in a very fair manner. In her campaigning, in her contesting, she used the official machinery. That is, the election commission and all other things were subverted. And in 1971 elections were not fair. And it is in 1975, as I told, there was a bitter conflict with judiciary. Okay, after the Keshwanand Bharti case in 1975, the Allahabad High Court gave the verdict saying that Indira Gandhi is she whatever the Raj Narayan claimed are correct, and Indira Gandhi became prime minister by using unfair means. And with this, she had 6 months to step down from prime minister's office. Now, when an Allahabad High Court judgment came up, then the opposition leaders became, you can say, they became so much angry with Indira Gandhi because on one hand, this lady has won the elections by using unfair means. On the other hand, she was not ending the emergency, which was imposed from 1971 till 1975. Now, all opposition leaders came together and they went and surrounded Indira Gandhi's house. And they said, like, Indira Gandhi, she did not win the elections in a fair manner, but she was not lifting the emergency provisions also. She was using the constitution not to help the people, but to exploit the people. Now, constitution is about democracy. Now, the same constitutional provisions were used in suppressing the democratic rights, like emergency provisions. Now, when opposition surrounded Indira Gandhi's house, they said, like, until Indira Gandhi resigns, we are not going to move forward. Now, sorry, yeah, this was the time Indira Gandhi was panicked. She had other options to approach higher judiciary, but again with higher judiciary, she had multiple problems. Okay, like one is on Keshwanand Bharati case, and one is on the Supreme Court Chief Justice. Generally, the Chief Justice would be the senior most person, that is a convention. But she violated the convention and she nominated Justice A.N. Ray as Supreme Court Chief Justice of India. Now, all these challenges, she was entangled in all these challenges. Now, she was panicked and she felt like my post is going to be under threat. And if I am not Prime Minister, then the next thing, if anyone becomes Prime Minister, if any opposition leader become Prime Minister, I am going to be sent for prison for my entire life. Now, what she has done is she called President of India, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad, and she phoned him, said that, okay, impose one more emergency. Now, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad was shocked. Okay, he asked Indira Gandhi, Madam, already one emergency is going on. Okay, the President of India said, already one emergency is going on. Now, why do you require one more emergency? She said, impose another emergency under the ground that is called internal disturbance. Under internal disturbance, and suspend enforcement of all other fundamental rights on internal disturbance, and suspend all other fundamental rights including right to life and detention and conviction. All other rights would be suspended, enforcement of all other fundamental rights would be suspended. And once this proclamation has been made, that is why the third emergency was imposed in 1975. When the third emergency was imposed, all other fundamental rights were suspended. In fact, all opposition leaders were put behind the bars. Okay, the army was called, and the army kept all other opposition leaders in jails. Now, in fact, a lot of other events were also going on in the country, like there was a railway strike. Okay, parallelly there was a railway strike. All the railway employees, they said, like, for lot of time we are not paid our dues, and our salaries were not increased, and the railways stopped functioning. Now imagine in 1970s, when railways were the only mode of transport. When railways stopped, the whole economy was halted. Then, in fact, there was one more movement led by Jayaprakash Narayan. If you could recollect, in freedom struggle, also one of the leaders of Quit India movement. Okay. Now, Jayaprakash Narayan started one more movement called Sampurna Kranti movement, or JP movement. Sampurna Kranti movement or JP movement. Now, under this Sampurna Kranti movement, from Patna, they started marching to Delhi. Now, under this Sampurna Kranti movement, people tied white clothes to their mouths, showing that we were not having any rights, and they also started surrounding Indira Gandhi's place. That means she had multiple challenges to deal with. One is with judiciary, one is with railways, one is with economy, one is with democratic movements, one is with opposition. Now, in all these challenges, she has imposed the emergency, and this emergency was not imposed for war or external aggression, but it was imposed to protect her political position. That is why this emergency became the most controversial of this one. I hope you got it. Why? What is the reasons for imposing of emergency? Any questions till now? Okay. Now, this was the time. Okay, I hope this would cover whatever we discussed. Okay, she was found guilty of the election fraud, and she was asked to step down. That is, within within 6 months she has to step down, and for 6 years she cannot contest for any other elections. This was the judgment of Allahabad High Court, and this was the time when she has imposed the emergency. And once the emergency was imposed, now we can see that all other political leaders like Jayaprakash Narayan or Morarji Desai or Advani or Ashok Mehta or Vajpayee, now all these are top leaders of the opposition. All they were put behind the bars. Now, in fact, because of this movement, new leadership has emerged. Now, if you see, wherever there is a popular movement, a new leadership would emerge. Now, could you recollect Swadeshi movement, 1905? Who was the new leaders who would emerge? Can anyone recollect 1905 Swadeshi movement, Bengal partition movement? Till that point of time, Yeah, Lal Balpal, they would emerge from 1905.
Lal
Now, before that, there were leaders like Surendranath Banerjee or Dada Benoroji. Okay, all you can see Firoz Shah Mehta. They were the towering leaders of Congress. Now, from Swadeshi movement, new leaders would emerge. In the same way, after non-cooperation movement, a new set of leaders would emerge. Who would emerge from non-cooperation movement? Could you recollect Gandhi? Come on. Gandhi would emerge as a national leader from non-cooperation movement. In 1930, another set of leadership would emerge, like Sarojini Naidu, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and lot of other new leaders like Nehru would emerge as top leaders. Patel would emerge from 1930s. In 1942, Quit India movement, a new leaders would emerge. Could you recollect? Who were the new leaders of 1942? Because all top leadership in Congress were put behind the bars. Can anyone tell me? Come on. Yeah, he left
I
Congress,
think
but
Bose is
within
the only
Congress,
one
the
who
new
is
leadership
outside
would
the
emerge,
bus.
like Pattabi Sitaramaya, like Aruna Asaf Ali, Usha Mehta, okay, or Jay Prakash Narayan. All these leaders would emerge in 1947. In the same way, the popular movement of 1975 led to emergence of new leaders like George Fernandez, Ashok Mehta, or Vajpayee, or Advani, or JP, or Morarji as national level leaders. In fact, Lalu, Mulayam, all these were put behind the bars. Okay, during the emergency, it was during this time a new leadership would emerge. In the same way, the Lokpal movement. I hope you know that there was a Lokpal movement 2011. Now, this led to the Anna Hazare and gang. Okay, Arvind Kejriwal. So the rise of Arvind Kejriwal. It is thanks to this movement, or Kiran Bedi. All they emerged as at the national stage because of this Anna Hazare movement. I hope whenever there is a movement, a new leadership would emerge. Okay, this is something which is happening across the country, and 1975 was no exception. And because of anti-emergency or anti-Indira movement, this led to the emergence of new leadership, and this new leadership would emerge in this one. And 1975 to 1977, this was a period when emergency was imposed, and this was often called as the black spot on India's democracy. The black spot on India's democracy. Now you can write a few points. You can write down a few points about emergency. One question you can write. Maybe you can use your polity knowledge also. The 42nd Amendment Act. The 42nd Amendment Act. The 1976. The 42nd Amendment Act, 1976. Try to threaten democracy. The 42nd Amendment Act, 1976, tried to threaten democracy, while the 44th Amendment Act, 1978, while the 44th Amendment Act, 1978, tried to restore democracy. Okay, 42nd Amendment Act threatened democracy, whereas 44th Amendment Act restored democracy. Full stop, comment. Full stop, comment. Now you have to analyze what is there in 44th Amendment Act and what are the changes which are made to Article 352 after 44th Amendment Act. Okay, that is, in during the emergency period, there was one Amendment Act which was passed, that is what we call it as 42nd Amendment Act. That 42nd Amendment Act was passed during the very controversial period of emergency, and this 42nd Amendment Act 1976, a lot of changes were made in the constitution. This is often called as mini constitution. I hope you know that 42nd Amendment Act is called mini constitution because of lot of changes were made in constitution. Whereas 44th Amendment Act tried to undo whatever the changes were made in 44th Amendment Act except for few provisions. Now this was the time the constitution, the provisions were added like socialist, secular. I hope you know that. Okay. Now what is the reason? Maybe you will see later in your polity class what is the reason why it was added. Okay. Now the 44th Amendment Act, because the leaders they suffered the most. There were arrests and there were detentions. There were preventive detentions. The students were taken behind and it was like overcrowding of the jails. And in fact, there was a lot of other controversial things which happened during the emergency. But however, the public, the common public, in fact, the middle classes supported the democracy. Why they why they supported emergency, the controversial emergency? Because for common people, this was a time, the 21 months from June 1975 to March 1977. This was a time when all the government machinery was functioning normally because all the trains were running on time and all the public services were being functioning normally. If any of the official violate the norms given by the government, then they would be put behind the bars. No, they were threatened because of all these challenges. Then uh, 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 the government officials started functioning very promptly. Now, this is where the common people's support was. Some sections of people supported that the democracy was a threat to development in India. Threat to development in India. Okay. There are some sections still feel that India would have become a dictatorship, then the development would start. They show ample examples like in Singapore or China, lot of other countries with dictatorships they have managed to work well. And one of the major challenges for India is democracy. This is one school of thought. Okay, but at the same time, once people get used to democratic rights, it becomes very difficult for them to ignore. Now, however, in 1977, Indira Gandhi came to know that the situation in the country is getting normalized, and on March 21st, 1977, she asked for revocation of all the emergencies which were imposed, the two emergencies which were imposed, and elections were conducted. And for the first time in its history, after the post-independence, Congress has lost in the elections. Congress has lost in the elections, and for the first time in 1977, Janata Party came to power. Okay, Janata Party came to power in 1977. When Janata Party came to power, one of the major challenges for Janata Party is how to undo whatever the changes done by Indira Gandhi under 42nd Amendment Act. That is why the 44th Amendment Act 1978 passed by Janata Party government becomes very important. Okay, because this 44th Amendment Act amended Article 352 and lot of controversial provisions under Article 352 were removed, including the word armed rebellion. Today, if you see Article 352, the word armed rebellion is nowhere. Okay, it is replaced with a more concrete word. Sorry, internal disturbance is nowhere. The word internal disturbance was replaced with the word armed rebellion because internal disturbance is very open for interpretation. That is why this word internal disturbance, like you can see that internal disturbance under quotation, and this internal disturbance is replaced with a more concrete word armed rebellion. Okay, so write down the relationship between Article 352 and 44th Amendment Act 1978 maybe as a small work when you are discussing about this particular question, how 44th Amendment Act restored democracy. Any questions till now? Okay, now what became clear in India is now people got used to democracy. Now once people get used to democracy, it becomes very difficult for them to go forward. Now this was also the time, as I told, then in India a lot of other challenges are going up. Like one is the Khalistan movement, and in 1979 because of its own challenges, Janata Party came down to power. Okay, again there was Indira Gandhi who was elected. Once Indira Gandhi elected for the next term, she had new challenges, and this new challenge came from Khalistan. The Khalistan movement, separate Punjab. they wanted to exit from India, and in fact some sections were getting the support from Pakistan also. Okay, now this Khalistan movement was also brewing up in India, and this was the time that Indira Gandhi launched the Operation Blue Star. Okay, Blue Star. So some military operations are also important. Could someone recollect what is a military operation on integration of India? Integration of Hyderabad. Integration of Hyderabad. Yeah, Operation Polo. And integration of Goa.
Polo.
Operation Vijay, very good. Then
Operation
India's first
Vijay.
nuclear test. Smiling Buddha. India's second nuclear testing.
Smiling Buddha.
India's second nuclear testing, 1998. Can anyone tell me what is the code name of that? What is the military code name? Okay, it is Operation Shakti. Okay, it's Operation Shakti. Now, some military names are also important. So this was codenamed as Operation Blue Star, and she led to, you can say, the clearing out of the Golden Temple. Golden Temple in Amritsar became the hub for Khalistan movement, and this was the time when Operation Blue Star was launched, and the militants were flushed out, and there were also the controversies that the army entered into the holy premises, and they have ignored the basic, you can say, the rules of the temple, basic guidelines of the temple, and this finally led to her assassination. And because of this event, the Sikh community in general was completely against Congress. Okay, that is the reason finally in when the Congress came to power in 2004, that is the reason Manmohan Singh was chosen as Prime Minister. One of the reasons why Manmohan Singh was chosen as Prime Minister, so that the Sikh community would be satisfied, because as I told, like one particular community was completely alienated by Congress, and Congress felt that it is very important to acknowledge this one. And Manmohan Singh finally, on the behalf of Congress, he has finally apologized for what happened in 1984. I hope you got the background of the events which led to the crisis of democracy in India in 1975-1977. And this is a very important discussion to understand today. Now, maybe in your personality test, you can get a question like, what are the chances that the emergency can be imposed in India today? Do you think that the emergency which happened like 1975, can it be imposed in India today or not? Maybe. Will a repeat of emergency likely situation in India? Okay. So though there were three emergencies, we only talk about the 1975 to 1977, the third emergency which was imposed, because that was the most controversial. This one. Okay. In fact, there were a lot of other controversies like forced family planning and forced evacuation of the people, and all the political leaders were put behind the bars. Not only political leaders, those sections of bureaucrats who were not loyal to Indira Gandhi, who questioned her, or the teachers or scholars or academicians, even the media persons who wrote anything against the government were put behind the bars. In fact, to protest against her autocratic rule, the lot of media houses started publishing the newspapers with a clear with blank spaces in the newspapers. Okay, just to show their protest. That is, we were forced not to write anything. Okay, just to show their contempt. They have there was a gagging of the media. So all this were going hand in hand. Okay, I hope you got some understanding of what is national emergency, what are the implications, why it is imposed in post-independent India, what are the challenges. Any questions? Okay, if it is clear, we'll go to the other provision of emergency, that is state emergency. Article 356. Any questions till now on national emergency? Okay, if not, not, we'll go to the next one. That is state emergency. You can read this one. Now, Indian Constitution, we say that India, Article 1 says India is Union of States. Article 1 of the Constitution says, Article 1 Clause 1 says, India is Union of States. It is not United States of India. Okay, I hope you got the difference. What is the difference between United States of India and Union of States? Can anyone tell me? Not exactly. For example,
breaking
even,
away from the Union.
United States of America. It does not mean they break away from the Union. But what? No, no. Come on, no. Even in America, states cannot exit from Union.
They can.
They cannot.
Okay.
United States is where all the different states coming together and forming one nation. And Union of States
Right,
is
right.
where first we
That
form the
means
nation
this
and then
is
we may
a
divide
perfect example of
places into
federation.
states.
This is perfect example of federation. A perfect example of union is UK. Okay, so India's model is not perfect federation like US, nor a perfect unitary feature like UK. India is somewhere in between. India is somewhere in between. That is what we call Indian federal system is like Canadian federal system, like in the case of Canada. That is a strong center. Okay, a strong center. That is, we are somewhere in between, neither as weak as the states are not as weak as in the case of UK, nor as strong as in the case of USA. Now, it is something like in the case of Canada. Okay, that is the union of states. That is, we are, if you are asked a question whether India is a federation or union or unitary, which one would you choose? Which one you have to choose in exam? You can take a question. Okay, you can take a question. Is India take a small question. Is India a federation with unitary features? Is India a federation with unitary features or union with federal features? Union with federal features. Okay, try to attempt this question. Okay, now whether India is a federation with unitary features or union with federal features. Now this is a long going debate. Now, why first of all there is a provision called Article 356. By Article 356, whatever the federal features are there, now India would turn into unitary features. All federal features of the constitution would be suspended. Now again, Ambedkar gave his own logic. Now if you see this particular slide, here you can see that Ambedkar giving the logic why there should be a strong center and what is a fundamental position in the federal constitution. Okay, now can anyone tell me how many times Article 356 has been imposed in India? Yeah, more than 100 times. Very good. Article 356 or state emergency has been imposed more than 100 times. Now you can see here the list of states. You can just identify your home state, how many times it has been imposed. Again, it's a bit old statistic, maybe 3-4 years old, but still relevant. Okay, more than 100 times it has been imposed. Now, what would happen under Article 356? Okay, now whenever you are preparing for emergency provisions, okay, so if you want me to quickly go through, I can go through, otherwise I can give you the assignment, whatever way you want. You want me to quickly go through the way you have to prepare for emergency provisions, or you'll deal in polity class? You have to go through. Okay, I'll give you the idea how to go through. Maybe I'll give
So
you
let's
maybe
go through, sir.
just just draw this table when you're preparing. Just draw this table. Article 352, Article 356, and Article 360. Now, how to prepare for emergency provisions? Article 352, Article 356, and Article 360. Now, here you can write what are the grounds of declaration. What are the grounds of declaration? On what grounds it can be imposed? Okay, just make it like this. What are the grounds of declaration? That is, for example, Article 352. It is imposed on the grounds of, come on, here, what would you write? War, external aggression, or armed rebellion. Today it is armed rebellion. You can write internal disturbance, strike
War,
it off, and write armed rebellion, so that you will be
armed
remembering
rebellion.
that. Earlier it was internal disturbance, now it is armed rebellion. Then, beside that, mention the parliamentary approval and duration. Sorry, parliamentary approval, parliamentary approval and duration. You can use your Lakshmikant or any textbook. You'll get all this, but make a list of parliamentary approval and duration. For example, Article 352, it would be approved by Parliament within 1 month. Okay, mention that 1 month, and it has to be approved by Parliament by special majority. And approval of Parliament is only for 6 months at a time. Maybe all these facts you'll get in your Lakshmikant. Okay, write down the Parliament approval and duration. How Parliament can approve it, within how many times, and what is the duration. Then write down what are the effects of national emergency. What are the effects of national emergency? Now, this effects you would further divide into three categories. Effects you divide into three categories. Okay, make this table maybe in a better way into three categories. First, effect on center-state relations. What is the effect of this one on center-state relations? Then, what is the effect of national emergency on the life of legislatures? The life of legislatures. That is, how much time the Lok Sabha would be extended, the life of state legislative assembly would be extended. Then, what is the effect on fundamental rights? What is its effect on fundamental rights? Okay, make a list like this. Then, the fourth one, you can write about the revocation of emergency. Revocation means ending. How to end the emergency, that is called revocation. Who can end the emergency? Okay. For example, in the case of Article 352, Lok Sabha, by a special sitting, it can revoke national emergency. Now, if you prepare like this, one particular sheet, you are going to cover your whole of emergency provisions, maybe half sheet. Okay, this is the way you have to make your notes. I hope you got a idea how to prepare. Okay, I'm not saying the terms. This would be told by your polity class or any textbook give you the factual information, but write down this in this manner. What are the grounds? What is the parliamentary approval and duration? And the effects, the life of Lok Sabha, life of Legislative Assembly. Okay, then center-state relations, how they are changed, and what is its effect on fundamental rights. Now, Article 356, what are the grounds? Can anyone tell me? On what grounds Article 356 can be imposed? No, that is for removal of president or impeachment of
Violation of
president.
constitution.
Okay, breakdown of constitutional machinery. Breakdown of constitutional machinery. Okay, again, you are not using your own logic. You are going as per the constitution only. You are writing these things as per the constitution only. Breakdown of constitutional machinery. Okay. Then, if the president or governor is satisfied that the governance of the state cannot be carried on the basis of this constitution, he can proclaim the emergency to that effect. That is what mentioned in Article 356. Okay. Now write down what grounds it can be imposed, then parliamentary approval and duration. You will check and write it. And can anyone tell me what is the effect on center-state relations if the president rule is imposed? What would happen to state government? Mhm. State government can be dissolved or it can be kept under suspension. Okay, this under suspension you can underline because state government can be dissolved. Dissolved means they have to go for fresh elections. The chief minister and other ministers, they have to go for fresh elections. Under suspension means for time being it would be kept. Okay, and the president would assume all the powers vested with the state government except for the power of high court. Now all the powers would be taken over by the president. Any effect on fundamental rights because of state emergency? There are no effects on fundamental rights. Okay, whenever the state emergency is imposed, common people do not have any effect, whereas national emergency is imposed, your fundamental rights would be suspended. Under Article 358, the 6 sets of freedoms can be suspended. Under Article 359, the suspension of enforcement of other fundamental rights except Article 20 and 21 can also be done. Okay, I hope it's clear the way you have to prepare. And revocation, how to revoke? It is by end of duration. Once the president rule is imposed for a time being, after the end of duration, it is automatically revoked. Okay, if it is not extended, or president can revoke the emergency at any time. Any questions the way you have to prepare for this one? Again, it is a part of your polity syllabus. Make a list and try to prepare in a better way. But you, in your post-independence history, you have to understand the provisions are not important, but what are the events which led to the provisions are important. Any questions till now? Now, Article 356 is said to be one of the most controversial articles in the Constitution. Most controversial. If I were to pick one important case, I will pick Keshwanand Bharati case. If I have to pick one important constitutional amendment act, I will pick 42nd Amendment Act. If I have to pick one controversial article in the Constitution, I would pick Article 356. Now, this is the most controversial article in the Constitution. You can write down a statement. Till today, there was no use of Article 356. Till today, there was no use of Article 356. Full stop. Full stop. Only misuse. Only misuse. Okay, full stop. I hope you got the point here. That is, Article 356 was never used for the purpose it is there in the Constitution. Okay, all the governments which are at the union level, they are using Article 356 to misuse. That is, to arm twist the state governments. Okay, and most importantly, to arm twist the opposition-led state governments. Okay, if Congress is ruling at the center and Congress is ruling at the state, Article 356 would never be imposed. But if Congress is ruling at the center and BJP is ruling at the state, then opposition-led states, always Article 356 would be a threat. And this is one of the major threats of Indian federalism. Okay. Now you can see that which president has imposed the president's rule the most. In fact, it was the Indira Gandhi's favorite article. If you see here, the first prize goes to Indira Gandhi, and also not only the first, but also the third prize again goes to Indira Gandhi. And Janata Party is no different. When Janata Party came to power, within this particular 2 years, it tried to suspend as many Congress governments as possible, okay, to take the revenge. Okay, now this is not something new which is happening. The misuse of Article 356, now this is become a norm. Article 356 has become a norm, and various committees and commissions have talked about Article 356. And also, you can write one more important case related to Article 356. That is, can anyone tell me what is the most important case related to Article 356? Given by Supreme Court. Supreme Court gave the guidelines for Article 356. Okay, I'm just putting it in the chat. It is SR Bommai versus Union of India 1994. SR Bommai versus Union of India 1994. Okay, try to see what are the guidelines given by the Supreme Court in SR Bommai case for the indiscriminate use of Article 356. Indiscriminate use of Article 356. Okay, but however, this is a very important ruling. Now, after 1994, what you will notice is the imposition of Article 356 has decreased. Okay, that is after this one. Sorry, after 1994, we can see that there was no much. I'm not saying it has ended, but the way it has been used in the past, it has reduced thanks to SR Bommai case and judicial intervention. Okay, and because of this, we can see that there is a reduction of misuse of Article 356 over the opposition-led state governments. I hope you got the understanding here, but still there are cases where there was indiscriminate use of Article 356. The recent examples are in Arunachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, where the judiciary had to interfere and it had to untangle the crisis which has been created by indiscriminate use of Article 356. Okay, now Article 352 is a threat on democracy, whereas Article 356 is a threat on Indian federal structures. Okay, that means we are electing the chief ministers, we are electing, people are electing their ministers, but suddenly because of the political differences, if the government is suspended, now where are we democracy? Now, whenever you are writing that India is elections only democracy, when you are supporting your answers, you can write about all this. That is, instead of only the caste or the hierarchies which is there in Indian society, but on political grounds also, like Article 352, Article 356, then AFSPA, all these are what we can say that the challenges to India's democracy. Okay, so despite all this, India came to be known as the most successful democracy in the third world. Okay, and the credit goes to Election Commission. Okay, any questions till now? I hope you will be able to write 1250 words. That is, if essay comes on India democracy, you should be in a position to write 200 words. I hope, like, I gave enough material to you. What is democracy? Different models of democracy. Okay, and how democracy prevailed in India. And people, once they get used to democracy, even the most favorite leader of them, Indira Gandhi, even she had to step down to power. Okay, so all these are the lessons learned in democratic process. Now, whether democracy is a threat to development or whether democracy is a fuel factor for development, this is a debatable question. Okay, maybe in your polity class or in your IR class, you'll learn more about the democracy, different models of democracy, but I just gave you a heads up so that whenever you read these things, this would be helpful. Any questions till now? Please do let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll stop for today. We have 1 or 2 minutes. If you want any questions, speak up. Otherwise, we will wind up the class for today. And tomorrow's class, we will discuss about the tribal integration into India, the challenges. Okay, if time permits, you can come prepared with tribal integration into India and the challenges of tribal integration. Okay. Okay, we'll stop for today then. Thank you.